A second topic that I want to explore with you is material developed by a guy named Terry Gorski, who used to be a big guru in the world of recovery and relapse prevention, a therapist himself, an author. He did workshops. I actually saw him speaking at a group in Massachusetts once. And he talks about the ways in which a person develops addictive or compulsive behavior and the ways in which they transition out of it. There are a number of stages from being a user to being fully clean and in a stable recovery. I only worry about the first two stages, the first one being transition, the second one being stabilization. In transition, the first thing that has to happen that's going to move me anywhere are what he calls motivating problems, right? Problems serious enough, painful enough to motivate me to think about doing something about them. Obviously, if I'm doing something and things are going along just fine, or my denial and repression are working just fine so that I'm convinced things are going well, I'm going to just keep doing what seems to be working. I don't even give it much of a second thought until the problems become painful enough for me to rethink it. What are those problems? Well, they're typically the basics: money problems, relationship problems, work problems, health problems, legal problems. Uh, and they're becoming annoying and painful, and I'm going to have to do something about them. However, if I'm seem to be building this compulsion or addiction, the last thing I'm going to do, literally, is to quit my behavior. I'm going to try to solve those motivating problems any other way I can. I got money problems because of my dope use. Well, hey, you know what? A guy told me if I go and buy pills for him, or go get some ice packs, or go steal some anhydrous, or whatever he needs in his particular process for cooking, he'll just trade me some dope for me being his mule for getting his things. Sometimes, yeah, I'll and move up to distributing. I'll sell a little bit, and I'll sell enough so that it covers my own using habit. I've just solved my money problems. I may also take a second job, or put my wife to work as a second job to make some more money. Tell her I'm tired of the money she's spending on the kids' clothes. We're having money problems. She needs to tighten down, but I'm not going to quit using my dope. Um, and with relationships, hey, you know what? I have a girlfriend, but she's giving me a hard time about how much time energy I'm devoting to using. Well, guess what? There are a lot of other women on the planet. I'll go find one that doesn't give me a hard time, and maybe I'll find one wants to get high with me, and then we're going to have a great time together, right? I just solved my relationship problems. I'm avoiding those friends who've been hassling me. Uh, Now I got all these people that, yeah, in my own mind, I think they're friends, but they're just using buddies, and but that's just fine. I'm having a good time. I've solved my relationship problems. My job, well, there are other jobs. I'm going to find one that doesn't do random testing. There are some jobs where, actually the employers don't mind at all that I'm using meth, because I can really, I can work those 70-hour weeks as long as I'm getting a little meth in between, and that's just fine. When I finally burn up and blow away, well, they'll replace me with someone else. It's not a problem. But otherwise, there are other jobs. I'll find another job, or ideally, maybe I'll learn how to cook this stuff myself, and I'll start selling it, or I'll just deal it for my cook. And hey, I'll make a whole lot more money on a Friday and Saturday night than I would have made working all week. Um, I don't need money. I don't need a job. That solved everything. Man, I am a genius. Health problems, well, I'm feeling a little run down, but my drug will help me fix that. Or I'm getting a little worried about some other things. But hey, if I get high, I'll just rise above all that. I won't think about it. It won't weigh me down at all. Um, by the time I finally face some of the real serious health issues that my using has caused me, I'm usually pretty well down the road. If nobody intervenes, if nothing stops me, I'm probably not going to stop myself soon enough. I'm going to have some medical problems. Uh, and so forth and so on. It's hard to fix the legal problems, but I've certainly known people who were dealing who set some money aside for their lawyer fund. They knew that if they went and got the right, big shot lawyer, that they'd be able to get off pretty lightly. They had the money just waiting for it. I knew guys that they bought their house, but they had it in their mom's name. So even if the feds got them, they couldn't confiscate the house. The same thing with the car. Some people are really ingenious about how to avoid the potential impact of being caught for criminal behavior. The law might be something of a threat, but it's not enough to stop them. I've solved that problem. I'm just going to keep rolling along doing my thing. So I've had motivating problems, and I've figured out an ingenious way of solving them all without having to slow down my behavior one bit. But time passes, complications come along, and I can no longer escape those painful realities anymore. I've come to the conclusion that I can't solve those motivating problems as long as I'm doing what I'm doing. I've got a choice. I either suffer or I change. So I'm going to change. I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to somehow control my using. I'm only going to get high on Saturdays now, so I'm not going to be late for work, and maybe the wife will calm down, get off my back a little bit more if I'm not getting high too much. I won't be spending as much money, won't be putting myself as much risk. It'll slow down the health issues. I'm just going to control it. Hey, you know what? I've discovered that it's when I drink tequila that I really get out of control and I get into fights and I black out and I don't know what happens. I'm just going to quit drinking tequila, just stick with whiskey or vodka or rum. I'm going to control my behavior. I'm only going to drink on occasion. I'm only going to drink this. I'm only going to drink this much. And some people have experienced enough pain and they can make that change. They discovered that really their behavior isn't that compulsive once they face reality and do something about it. They can just get high on Saturday. They can just drink a little less of something that doesn't really put them out of control. It works for them. The kind of people we end up dealing with who end up in the criminal justice system or end up in a counselor's office are often people for whom that self-control didn't work. They switched from cocaine to methamphetamine because it was a lot cheaper. But now they're spinning out on methamphetamine, getting themselves in all kinds of trouble. Yeah, sure, they went to just using on Saturday, but then it was Saturday and an occasional Tuesday. And then it was basically every Tuesday as well, plus the occasional Thursday. And now it's back to their former regular using, often too much, and everything is back into that old routine. So Terry Gorski describes it as a series of failures. First, I tried to solve my motivating problems without doing anything about my using, but eventually I failed, and then I had to negotiate, well, what can I change or control about my using that will help eliminate my motivating problems. I tried that, and I failed. A lot of people succeeded. Some people set aside a pack of cigarettes and said, I'm never going to smoke again, and they didn't. Some people say, I'm only going to drink on Saturday, and they only drink on Saturday. Some people, however, find themselves somehow unable to truly break free and control their behavior. It's become compulsive. It's going to continue to create motivating problems unless something stops it. I've failed at solving my problems. I've failed at controlling my use. And for some people who now have to come to a realization of their true situation, it can be very, very painful, very upsetting. My new understanding is the only way I am ever able to avoid my motivating problems is if I quit using, right? The only way I'm going to avoid ever getting in over my head in credit card debt is to cut up the cards and close those accounts, period. Right? The only way I'm going to avoid getting wrapped up in this compulsive bingo is to never play bingo again. I can't even go to the church function and play bingo with my church people because it's just going to get out of control from there. I can't drink just a little, I'm going to drink a lot. I can't use just a little, I'm going to be using all the time. For a small percentage of the population, that seems to be how they're wired. It seems to be their unique curse, their medical condition. And it's a challenge for them to have to deal with that. Failure after failure, pain after pain. And now I've come to realize what it might be terrible news for me to hear. The only way to successfully move on in my life is to quit this behavior that has become normal for me. And just because I realize it's time to quit doesn't mean I'm ready to quit. Some of us get to a point where it is, I've had enough, the pain's too much, the struggle is overwhelming. You know, people talk about finally hitting bottom, hitting rock bottom, but I always encourage people, man, as soon as you can understand it's time to turn around, turn around. Don't wait to hit rock bottom. People have their own journeys, their own pathways. And for many, they come to the realization it's time to stop. And so they stop. They change their behavior. They quit altogether. But that's when we run into that last symptom. Remember that last symptom? Loss of willpower. I finally decided it's time to quit, but that doesn't seem to matter because here I am doing it again, using again, falling to the temptation, giving into the craving, mindlessly obeying the master that controls my thoughts and my behavior. I discovered that for me to quit and stay quit, I'm going to have to face another really painful realization that I need help. And many of you maybe are and certainly know people who don't like to have to ask for help at all. Some people won't accept help at all, no matter what it is. And so it's understandable that for a lot of people, trying to overcome an addiction that requires me to accept help is another painful obstacle that I may spend years before I actually get anywhere. Help comes in a variety of forms. It may be being arrested, put in jail long enough to dry out, then maybe put on probation, house arrest, work release, put into some sort of program, getting some support, whether it's a 12-step program or some other support system. It might be residential treatment. Some people actually get help in less formal ways. A spouse that says, if you don't get sober, if you don't get clean and stay clean, you're never going to see your kids again. And that becomes just enough motivation for them to finally face the day-to-day decisions required to stay clean, to get sober. Uh, so I've gotten help. I've stopped, and for the moment, stopped. I've finished the transition process that Gorski describes. But it's like I just had knee surgery. I'm really not stable. I really can't just stand on my own 2 feet yet. I need some more support through what Gorski calls the stabilization stage. That's what we'll look at next. Stabilization, to get stable in recovery, is an important part of anyone's recovery. It allows them to build some strength, some confidence, to put some healthy time in their life to recover more fully and to discover the tools that they need in order to keep winning this fight on a daily basis. Some people, in order to get stable, have to overcome serious withdrawal. And so they may be placed into a residential treatment center or hospital sometimes. Serious withdrawal from alcohol, tremors, seizures, the DTs that we've heard about that can be fatal because the withdrawal is so painful. We've heard stories of how difficult withdrawal from the opioids are, whether it's the pills or heroin or morphine or whatever we're using, whether it's the more natural or the synthetic opioids. The withdrawal is described by a lot of people as the most painful, serious, long-lasting case of the flu you've ever known, and it scares you so much that you flee back into using to avoid the pain. Now you're not using to feel good, you're using to avoid feeling bad. Some people need hospitalization. Some people need serious, intense residential treatment. Other people just need a little time. They're not experiencing an acute withdrawal, just a smaller symptomology of withdrawal. They're confused, they're fatigued, they're moody, they're unstable emotionally, forgetful, and so forth and so on. The kinds of things that will recover if I can stay clean for a little while and my brain can establish a new normal once I get through those post-acute withdrawal symptoms. Now physically, I'm more likely to be able to hang in there. One of the things that we'll need early on is structure. In some drug court programs, clients are sentenced to do 90 meetings in 90 days, go to AA or NA every day, at least once, plus report weekly to your drug court officer, plus perhaps some other structure, accountability. You may be on house arrest, maybe with the bracelet, maybe in a halfway house, maybe just on probation. But you're accountable and you have to adhere to the structure. Some probation programs, like the ones I deal with in Gibson County, it's a much less structure, and a seriously addicted person trying to recover, fresh out of using, is likely going to need additional structure, the kind of thing that I might impose upon them, not simply by meeting with me, but by going to 12-step meetings, by getting some additional support. But the structure becomes critical. Structure can be anything like reporting to an employer, reporting to probation, seeing a drug alcohol counselor on some prescribed basis, whatever might be deemed necessary by that counseling service. Uh, there's structure about people you're supposed to stay away from. And if you're in the criminal justice system, you're supposed to avoid other felons. Your counselor will tell you to avoid any former using partner. You're told to stay away from bars and clubs and places where the primary activity involves the use of alcohol. And for some people, it's even dangerous for them to go to a restaurant where you may not have to sit in the bar area, but it's obvious that it's right over there and there's lots of people drinking. And it may just not be a safe place for you to be. Structure where you can go, where you can't go, where you report, when you report. All of those different support systems, like a walker, like a four-pronged cane, like crutches, something to help me walk until I can really gain stability and strength needed to keep going, to move on my own without all of the support. It can take quite a while for some people. Some people decide that they're better off with some sort of regular support system the rest of their lives. Other people get sober, adjust, and seem to do pretty well without a great deal of ongoing structure. The other aspect of stabilization that I focus on, again, is less about the physical or even the tangible structures, and it's more about managing your mental process. And I'll talk about that next. Maybe you remember hearing about Pavlov's dog. It's an old social science study about a man who had a dog, and he would feed that dog on a regular time, and every time he presented the food, he would ring a bell. The dog began to associate in his mind eating with the sound of the bell. Eventually, Pavlov would bring the dog in and ring the bell without having food, but the dog would still salivate. There was a biological connection now between his brain and the hearing of the bell. Without any food present, the body just reacted, and it established this sense of there being triggers that don't just evoke memories, but create cravings, create a physiological response to anything that closely reminds us of our using or our compulsive behavior. You'll see some television commercials where they have these beautiful women biting into these obnoxious looking sandwiches. They're trying to create a trigger in people so that not only when they see the sign for that restaurant will they think of the sandwich, but when next time they see a pretty girl, they'll remember, oh, that reminds me of that pretty girl I saw biting into that obnoxious sandwich. I think I'm going to pull over and buy the sandwich. It sounds bizarre, but obviously billions of dollars are spent to create within potential customers these kinds of triggers. You drive down the highway and you see a billboard with this giant yellow M and a package of French fries. Seeing it reminds you of your previous experience with French fries. Now, if you had a terrible experience with French fries from the Giant M restaurant, then that might create one kind of response. But if you remember how delicious they were when they're perfect, and the combination of grease and salt It's almost irresistible. Now it's been triggered. Now I think I'll pull off, go through the drive-through, get me some fries. Maybe I'll get something to go with that right now. The industry, the restaurant industry, and even more so, the advertising industry depends upon being able to create these kinds of triggers. We're going to talk more about triggers in another segment on early recovery skills. But for now, as we complete this stabilization stage, Terry Gorski says it's important to recognize that sometimes something will remind us of our compulsive behavior. And what typically happens is it triggers a memory that is then exaggerated. And all I can think about is how wonderful it was, how good the experience was, and I begin to essentially relive it. I managed to crop out all of the negative repercussions, all of the experiences that went with my behavior that aren't so pleasant, all of the cons, and all I can think about is just how wonderful it is. It becomes hyperbolic, and it tends to build. Gorski says the key to the whole process is to now be able to shut that down, recognize, wait a minute, this is dangerous thinking. In 12 steps, they call it stinking thinking. This is dangerous thinking. I need to stop this. Our rationalizations may come in, well, I'm not going to use, I'm just going to daydream about it. Certainly there can't be anything wrong with that, but there is. It's like the bell ringing in Pavlov's dog's ear. I'm starting to have a biological response. My brain is now taking over, and it's becoming less and less voluntary and more compulsive. Gorski says if you can't shut it down, then you need to start writing out the whole story. Tell the painful realities too. I always recommend to people, if you can't shut it down quickly, that's when you need to have two people you can call. Two, because one may be busy, but two also because you want to have one person who maybe is just going to talk to you about conversations you've had in the past about. Now, remember, we talked about this, and in your heart, in your mind, you don't want to return to using, that it wasn't the wonderland that your brain is trying to tell you it is, that actually a very painful experience. There's a reason you quit, and there's a reason you want to stay quit. And we have to think about the kids, and we have to think about your health, and we have to think about how difficult jail time would be if you had to go or go again, and so forth. Maybe one of those friends is that person you've already had that conversation with who agrees to walk you through the reality. The second person may be just someone who says, I'm just going to talk to you about anything under the sun just to try to get this thought out of your mind. It's like, sing to me one tune because I've got this other tune in my head that just will not go away. But if you sing enough to me, maybe it'll let go of me. So if we've managed to shut down that triggering hyperbolic thought about how wonderful it has been, and then therefore how wonderful it will be if I can do it again. If we shut that down, well, then we're good. We go on. If we don't shut it down, then people in recovery tend to start having this play-by-play battle. Getting high was a wonderful experience, or going to the casino was so much fun and so much excitement. But this life in recovery, away from using or drinking or gambling, is so boring. I just can't stand it. Part of our brains might even attach it to other more intense fears and frustrations. We could feel like I'm just going to die if I don't get some experience that's more fun or more exciting, more thrilling, or some reenactment of that wonderful, wonderful experience I had. So using is wonderful, being in recovery, being sober is terrible, and they start chasing themselves around in your head like a tornado, and the next thing you know, it's spinning out of control. Or think of the the metaphor of the snowball rolling down the hill. The longer I let it go, the bigger it gets. The bigger it gets, the less likely I am to be able to stop it. My thinking starts getting obsessive. I can't quit thinking about it. My behavior starts getting compulsive. I'm just going to go drive by my old dealer's house just to see how things are going, just to see who might be there. Maybe I'll stop in and say hi. And next thing you know, I'm driving there. My behavior is compulsive. The more I think about it, the more powerful it gets, and it creates that physical craving. Uh, Gorski is adamant that we want to shut this down long before it becomes a craving, because cravings, you may know from experience, are really difficult to beat. More than likely, we're going to say, I'm just going to cave. I'm going to give in. I'm going to have that one more Twinkie right now. I'm going to eat that one more bowl of ice cream right now. I'm going to have that one more Reese's cup right now, even though I know I shouldn't. I'm just going to do it. And you know what? That'll get it out of my system, and then I'll be able to start fresh again later. Tomorrow will be a new day. I'll get this out of my system. Tomorrow I'll be fresh and I'll be in recovery again. Unfortunately, rather than shutting it down or calming it, it tends to make things worse, make the compulsion stronger. And it's shown me that, as it turns out, I can't win.